It is the 27th of March 2014 by the mainstream calendar, or the end of Pitaki Sum, what is this year our 6th winter moon in the Blackfoot calendar. And I'm down by the confluence of the St. Mary's and Old Man River. And I'm going to try my best to show you something beautiful that I'm witnessing. Down here in this area that I call the Sagebrush Flats, which is the highest shelf of the floodplain at this particular floodplain forest. There are two ancient, very ancient cottonwood trees. This one that you see here in the foreground that's fallen this winter, which I've always called the grandma tree, and this other large one back behind, which I've always called the grandpa tree. And it's hard to really get perspective, I think, in this camera, but these are very large trees for this region. This is the kind of like the high desert plains, and both of these trees have trunks that are approximately, between 5 and 6 feet wide at the base, which is very large for this region. These trees are ancient. They've been here easily since the Buffalo era, before there were any white colonizers, European colonizers that came out. And they've seen a lot of life in their days. The reason that I used to call this tree the grandma tree is because there was this big cavity on this side of the trunk that was so large that it, like, I remember bringing my students down here, and the tallest and broadest of my students, Joey Blood, stood inside the cavity and just dwarfed him. And he's, somewhere around 6'5" or something like that. He's a pretty big guy. But this was the case that instead of hugging this tree could hug you. There was, on this side right here, there was a great big cavity that multiple people could fit into. And so for that reason I always call this the grandma tree. But what I'm witnessing here now that she's fallen is that there's a lot of other good reason to have always referred to her as the grandma tree. From over on this side, I can see, in the split, this thick area here with just millions of little borer holes from many generations of insects. I'm sure 1 million insects more have used grandma tree as their nursery over the years. She's been responsible for all of this life. Every little nook and cranny, you see a place where her bark has broken off a little bit, and in the area below there's evidence that some wasp has nested. How much life right now is hidden in her bark. All of the little hibernating insects, all of the eggs of the generation that will come out this winter. How many larvae are gnawing on her wood and growing toward adulthood right now. I mean, she's assisted so much life, and you know, that's just looking at the insects. How many birds have nested in her boughs? How many deer have eaten her buds? She has supported a whole lot of life. And the most powerful thing that I'm witnessing down here right now, and this is the real beautiful thing that I want to show you, is that from her base, from her roots, you get this little tree. And not only this one little tree, but there are probably 20 or 30 shoots coming up. And these are not grown from seedlings. These are clones of the grandma tree. Right now, at this very moment, you are witnessing the real life embodiment of the mythological phoenix. Except here, this is no fairy tale. This is no fantasy. This is the real thing. This is Grandma Tree rising for a brand new life out of the death of her old body. And this I find really very powerful. This is something that doesn't have to be imagined. This is something that's real. And when you think about this, when you really think about what is being witnessed here, who's to say that this old body, this gigantic, ancient old body that's been here for a century and more, who's to say that that body was not also once a clone of an even more ancient grandma tree? It could be that grandma tree has been here 1,000 years. It could be that grandma tree will be here 1,000 more. So many things that this evokes. You know, for one, consider the deceit that our minds normally play on us. You know, when I look at this tree in the background, or when I look at Grandpa Tree, I think I'm looking at Grandpa Tree here, when in fact, the real essence of Grandpa Tree is underground and spreading out massive ancient root system who, you know, as I say, may have been here thousands of years. And I think this body that I'm seeing here in front of my eyes is Grandpa Tree. It's not. This is what Grandma shows us. This body is just, it's just here temporarily and serving all kinds of good ends to nurture life. And yet there's there's another part of her that's very hidden, but that's very real, out of which she's experiencing a rebirth right now. Now, I don't want to extrapolate on this to the point of creating some kind of metaphor that reinforces religious beliefs about the spirits of human beings or something like that, because that's something that you don't see like this. This is real. This is not fantasy or metaphor. This is the real deal. This is the power that we would like to have, so that we can feel comforted in that our death is not the end. But there are many ways in which we could, seek that comfort. Again, you think about how much life Grandma Tree has nurtured, and how much she's going to continue to nurture here. She's a long way from being gone. In fact, I'm going to be interested to follow her in death and witness that as well. How long is it going to take for Grandma Tree to disappear? I might be gone before she is. That old body. The new body, I hope, grows up to be a really nice big tree while I'm here to witness it. But we'll see. Just this morning, I was writing, and I used trees as an analogy to human beings, where I was saying that, we're born with certain genetic traits. Everybody's individual, unique, and some of the traits that we're born with are going to give us certain talents and certain natural inclinations, or toward or natural, or certain adaptations that are going to be really beneficial to us in our life. And there's other things that we're going to be, all of us are born with, other things that might hinder us. And the thing is to try to play up on the adaptations and advantages that you have. At the same time, as we grow in life, and especially during our formative years, in our childhood, we develop potentially different skills and talents, and we just find ourselves somewhat environmentally determined, but not entirely inclined toward certain skill developments and such that we carry with us for the rest of our life. It's just like this little tree here, right? This little tree here, this little baby Grandma Tree, is growing in a certain shape. And right now, even this far along, you can't do much to manipulate that shape. We are only so malleable. Once we're growing in a certain direction, we have to live with that experiential history, and grow from there. We can't go back and change things that we've already developed from. It's already in us. We can't do anything to change it. And it's going to be part of us the rest of our lives. And so, the only thing that's The only possibility for real change is something dramatic happening to our bodies. For instance, if we lose a large limb, as Grandpa Tree has. You look at Grandpa Tree and this big thing going up toward the trunk is actually an old limb that used to come out of there. And that limb fell, broke and fell, and probably because that limb fell, these other limbs were able to stretch out and take advantage of that area, that sunlight and such, grow in that direction. But it doesn't necessarily change Grandpa at base. He is who he is still. He can change his shape a little bit if something that was a big part of him is suddenly removed. He has to adapt. You know, same thing with me. If I lose my legs, I've got to adapt. But a lot of the potentialities for how I'm going to adapt is still based on my experiential history, my skills that I've developed in other areas that may not involve legs. So, you know, this is another aspect of what I'm looking at here with Grandma Tree is, you know, some of that evidence that something drastic happens. That's what gives the possibility for a brand new start of some kind. But even at that brand new start, there are limitations, and we're only so malleable. There are environmental limitations, and there's the base that we're growing from, the roots that aren't going to change. So Grandma Tree, you're providing a lot of good lessons today, and I'm sad to see that you've fallen over, but I'm going to continue to learn from you. And today you've blown my mind, because this whole thing going on here, that's powerful. So much life she's fed. Might as well give her a chance to feed me too. These are the some of the leaf buds that she would have been putting out a couple of moons' time. Leaf and flower buds. She's going to continue to support life. And she's still here. Renewed. A baby.